Welcome to the show. My name is Charlton with Big C. This is Charlton and Big C Sports, coming to you worldwide on the Big C Sports Network, on the #1 network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports has been voted the #1 sports show in the universe, according to Big C and them good old boys down south. I want to say bienvenidos to all of our listeners in Latin America, also across the pond, and London, England, as well as Paris, France. Of course, you good old boys in Canada. We love you in Africa, the Big C tribe. But there's no one we love more than you good old boys down south in the land of the free and the home of the brave on a beautiful February the 3rd, 2020. Grondo Deportes, Big C. How's it going for you good old boys down south?
Well, Charlton, I got to ask you a question. Is it raining out there in California?
No, it's cold, Big C.
Oh, okay. So those are just the tears from all the 49er fans that we've been hearing in the ground.
No, that's rain clouds, Big C. Rain clouds. It's not raining yet, but it's rain clouds. It's all fair, love, and war. I do want to say what a great Super Bowl it was. I really love the NFL and how they celebrated 100 years and Super Bowl 54. I want to say Big C Sports, sponsored by your Northern California Cadillac dealers, home of the all-new Cadillac Escalade, the standard of the world. And when you go by and test drive yours, tell them Charlton and Big C sent you, as well as a fleet of Cadillac cars. Big C Sports, powered by Google and Alexa. Just say Google or Alexa, play Big C Sports Podcast. You will hear from our sponsors. You will hear welcome to the show. I will introduce Big C as the Mystic, and he'll do his thing, and I really appreciate the way things are growing with Big C Sports Podcast. You can also follow Big C Sports Podcast on Xfinity, Comcast TV, Roku TV, Apple TV, Fire TV, and a lot of smart TVs all over the universe. Big C, why in the world would you say they're crying in California? Don't you know they're still mining for gold, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, they're still digging, and I guess they're still trying to dig the 49ers out of that hole they got themselves in last night.
Yeah, it's amazing how, to me, that was just a great event. I really liked the way, there were some people talking about the Super Bowl that the 49ers have played in that stadium a couple of times, but you wouldn't think so because they've done a $500 million in renovation to Hard Rock Stadium. It looks more like it was in London, Big C, and Wimbledon, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, the way that they've done the stadium, Charlton, they emulated what old Dallas, Texas stadium used to be, where they had the hole in the roof and the fans were covered. But it was a great setting for a Super Bowl last night. The weather cooperated. The fans were electric. Miami just put on a great show, as they've always known how to do for Super Bowls, going all the way back to Super Bowl #2, Charlton, when the Green Bay Packers hosted the Oakland Raiders there. And so it's just one of those festive events that the whole world was able to enjoy last night.
Yeah, I thought it was great, and I just love the fact that we had a nice Super Bowl. It didn't rain. I remember when Prince performed his thing a couple of years ago, it actually rained, but it was a great event, and I really appreciate what we saw. I do want to also pay homage, like a lot of people are doing now, to our military veterans. Big C, we do have a national suicide hotline. We want to help as much as we can, and we can help by giving out numbers. It's 800-273-8255. That's 800-273-8255. Or you can text 838-255. That's 838-255 and get some help. And for those of you online, just go to veteranscrisisline.net. That's veterancrisisline.net. Big C, why is that so important to you?
Well, Charlton, as the Super Bowl is able to take away everyone's worries and problems for some 3 hours last night, the problems for our great veterans in this country exist every day, Charlton. Those who have mental and physical problems and struggle emotionally and financially. And the National Suicide Hotline number is there for them, Charlton, to hopefully have someone to talk to that will not be judgmental, that can properly give them the information that they solely need. When we think about, we lose some 19 veterans a day in this country, Charlton, to the horrific disease called suicide.
Yeah.
Suicide has no discrimination about it, Charlton. It's one of those diseases that afflicts so many. And people think of it as an embarrassment. But the National Suicide Prevention Hotline number, Charlton, is hopefully there to prevent any more of these diseases from occurring. And hopefully people won't be embarrassed about calling the number.
Very well said. 800-273-8255. That's 800-273-8255. Or you can text 838-255. That's 838-255. Or if you're online, veteranscrisisline.net. That's veteranscrisisline.net. And hopefully they can all get some help. So really appreciate giving up that number. What I do also want to just say about last night's performance at the Super Bowl in Miami, and the halftime show was amazing also. There's so many dancers, and they had done a throwback to some of the past halftime performances. Of course, we've had in Los Angeles, they had Michael Jackson doing his thing. I still remember Prince, because when Prince, you know how sometimes the universe will also come to your halftime celebration. When Prince did his thing, he sang Purple Rain, and it was actually raining. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, it was one of those magnificent events. To me, it's one of the top 3 Super Bowl performances of all time, what Prince performed down in Miami, Charlton. But the Super Bowl is always a spectacle from the start through the finish.
Yeah, it really was. So we had some Hispanic, Latin influence. We want to thank our listeners in Latin America also. But to see Shakira and also J-Lo do their thing, and they had the choreographers, of course, all the dancers around it. And, I mean, everybody has their own flavor. But I really love, for the first time in a long time, it seems like diversity was included. It wasn't an anomaly that people had to put up with. I really saw the beautiful cultures that come together. I think Miami brings out the best in people. You're down south. I know you talk a lot about segregation and how it's still, I think there's 17 or 13 segregated states or Jim Crow states as far as wages in the United States. But on the surface, to me, that Super Bowl was so much about inclusion. Would you see the same thing, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, I don't know if you would call it inclusion, Charlton. I think it's more representation of the culture of the state of Florida when you think about the Latin influence from all over South America that is embedded in Florida culture, not just the Latins, but you think about the Cubans, the Dominicans, Charlton, and all of that are involved. And that's how they incorporated it last night. I would have liked to see a few more singers and possibly a few more male singers incorporated in, especially Pitbull. I know of his influence in the Miami area, Charlton, and many other greats. I thought about Luther Campbell might want to be in there from Two Live Crew from years ago. What he had involvement with the University of Miami. So, I mean, there was a lot of opportunities there. It was a great show nevertheless. It just shows the expansion and growth of the NFL in every capacity.
It really does. And something near and dear to my heart is when they did the coin flip. The NFL, I mean, it's not perfect. We still have some issues with race that I even learned about hitting, figures, how African-American men were actually banned, kind of a silent agreement a lot of good old boys made to keep black men out for about 12 years. But last night, I was hoping they would have paid some type of homage to Tom Flores, 2-time Super Bowl winner, but did not get him into the Coaches Hall of Fame. He only has 2 Super Bowl championships, though. I think you got to have 1 to qualify because most guys only have 1 that get in. But the Tuskegee Airmen, the toss out of the coin toss, the NFL salute to there was 4 men that were 100 years old, some veterans. We give out our admission, our hotline, Big C. But there were 4 veterans that are still alive, and they actually had them at the Super Bowl. And in the ceremony, during the live festivities, they had Colonel Davis. It was Tuskegee Airmen who fought in World War II, and he gave the coin that was tossed to start the coin flip. I know we talk about race. I know we talk about gender. To me, to salute our veterans and to have Tuskegee Airmen acknowledged for the 100th year of the NFL, Big C, I thought that was really classy. Your thoughts?
Well, when you think about the NFL has crossed the racial barriers decades ago, Charlton, and it doesn't recognize race in that industry because of the diversity of the league. Every country in America basically has played in the NFL, and to be represented at the coin toss by the Tuskegee Airmen, the greatest fighting force in World War II as far as air barrages, Charlton. They never lost any battle. So, I mean, it was a great representation and homage from the NFL to recognize the African-American culture.
Yeah, there's a movie called Red Tails. If people want to know, Red Tails, Cuba Gooding Jr. started in that. Take a look at that. You'll see about the Tuskegee Airmen. Big C, I just want to throw a few things out at you. Willie Mays, New York Giants. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Milwaukee Bucks. Wayne Gretzky, Edmonton Oilers. Patrick Mahomes, Kansas City Chiefs. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, when you talk about all those young, fine men, and they were all young at one time, Willie Mays, 1954 with the New York Giants, Charlton. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, which we all know as Lou Alcindor, with the 1974 Milwaukee Bucks. Wayne Gretzky with the Edmonton Oilers in 1984. And this year, Patrick Mahomes with the Kansas City Chiefs. All of these men, Charlton, before the age of 25, not only did they win their league's MVP in Major League Baseball, the NBA, the NHL, and NFL, they all were named the MVP of the championship that their teams won, Charlton, before the age of 25. So Patrick Mahomes last night joined some rarefied fraternity, Charlton, with 3 Hall of Famers, and hopefully one day we'll see him there.
Isn't that amazing to see such young men doing that? And also, as you mentioned, youngest quarterback to win the Super Bowl MVP. I was really impressed by his second half performance, not his first half, but second half. Patrick Mahomes winning at the age of 23 and actually 138 days. There was Tom Brady, who won at the age of 24 and 184 days. The great Broadway Joe Namath won at age 25 and 226 days. The great Joe Namath won at age 25 and 227 days. And Troy Aikman, the color analyst for the game, won at the age of 26 years and 71 days. So it's a young man's game, even though players are playing a lot longer. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, it is, Charlton. And when you think about Patrick Mahomes and Tom Brady being the only quarterbacks to win the MVP of the Super Bowl under the age of 25, 2 other NFL players under the age of 25 have also won the MVP in the Super Bowl, and that would be Marcus Allen and Lynn Swann. Both of those are at Southern Cal University. But when you think about a game, Charlton, that they say it takes maturity to play, it shows that youth and enthusiasm can get you to the pinnacle.
Yeah, it really does. And even I want to pay homage. There's a lot of things to get through, but I want to also pay homage to Lamar Jackson. And he's so classy at his announcement for his celebration, being chosen as the NFL's MVP. Big C thought that was really, really nice, even though I really think the MVP is Patrick Mahomes. But you can't knock a guy who got the vote, Big C, and that's the great Lamar Jackson. I think he's only going to get better, and he's a lot younger by year-wise, at least, than Patrick Mahomes. Your thoughts on Lamar Jackson being a unanimous MVP as a running back? I'm sorry, as a wide receiver. No, I'm sorry, as a defensive back. Hold on, wait a minute. I was reading some of the stuff that the media said. He's a quarterback, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, it was an outstanding feat by Lamar Jackson, Charlton, to be named the league's MVP. He followed up Patrick Mahomes from being that position last year when he won the league's MVP. But when I think about the NFL awards, Charlton, and this year as far as at the end of the season what it meant to African Americans, for the first time in NFL history, Charlton, African Americans did a clean sweep on all the major postseason awards. You talked about Lamar Jackson being the MVP of the NFL as an African-American quarterback. Kyler Murray being Rookie of the Year, Arizona Cardinals, as an African-American quarterback. Then you take Patrick Mahomes last night being MVP of the Super Bowl as an African-American quarterback. And also Stephon Gilmore, an African-American cornerback in the New England Patriots, being Defensive Player of the Year in the NFL. So when you think about the NFL and how it's changed and how black players, as you want to say minority players, are dominant in the league, they took every major award this postseason in the NFL.
Yeah, as you mentioned, for the first time in NFL history on Super Bowl week, all the major awards were won by African Americans. And it's so important to mention that because we spend so much time on the Me Too movement now, and there's nothing wrong with that. We're strong advocates for that. But if you don't recognize your past, and you're oftentimes to repeat it, these same men of color have been the most marginalized and pushed aside, and all they wanted was for an opportunity. And when given the opportunity, oftentimes people have not only succeeded but excelled. I want to get into this game because think about this. I mean, it was, to me, it was a great game. I really love the fact that we saw a dynamic defense with the 49ers. They held Kansas City to only, I think it was 10 points with just about 7 minutes to play in the game. No one could ever think that you could hold that team to 10 points and you have 7 minutes left in the game, but it's not how you start, it's how you finish. Now, I thought that Patrick Mahomes had a bad game at first, but as he mentioned, he gave a lot of credit to the 49ers defense. He said that's the best defense he had seen, but he adjusted to it, just like an airline will make adjustments, Big C, when they're flying to its destination. So give me your thoughts on how he started and then he finished, the difference, Big C, your thoughts.
Well, I mean, I thought he started and finished like I thought it would be, Charlton. I said what they had to do was wear out the cornerbacks in San Francisco, mainly Richard Sherman. I'm going to put receivers on him, use them as decoys, and run his legs out from under him. And you could see in the second half, that's what they did. Richard Sherman, I think he played his last game in the NFL last night because you could see him. He no longer has the stride to keep up with the fleet-footed receivers in the NFL. When Kansas City in the second half decided they wanted to go after him, Sammy Watkins took him over the top. It wasn't even close. He was trailing by 3 to 4 yards. Not only that, he could not even get Damian Williams out at the goal line when he was out in the flat. They put him on Richard Sherman to go after him to get into the end zone for the touchdown.
Yeah.
So as I saw the adjustments that Kansas City made in this game, yes, San Francisco has a vaunted defensive line, but they had vulnerability in the secondary. And when Patrick Mahomes was bad in the first half, he was just bad. But when he decided he wanted to be Patrick Mahomes, everything changed.
Yeah.
And he just took him to task.
Everything changed, but I do want to say, in defense of Richard Sherman, he's a cornerback now. I think he would do better at safety, but this is the first time in any playoff or Super Bowl game that anyone scored a touchdown on him, and that was when he was trying to stop the play that was going to the corner of the end zone by Williams. It may have been out of bounds. His foot was out of bounds, but the ball crossed first. That's what the official says, so I'm not going to go too much into that. But that's really the only time that he's given up a score, and that's saying a lot in 13 or 14 games, Big C. Maybe he'd be better at safety, not cornerback, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, when it's the most crucial game, Charlton, those are the ones that stick out. I mean, you can go to games that are irrelevant, but when the money's on the line, Charlton, and you call a guy the best guy in the game at cornerback, and a team like the Kansas City Chiefs said, this is the guy we're going to go after. They stayed away from the young cornerback. They went directly after him. And so other teams see that weaknesses also. You got to understand that the 49ers do a lot of cover-up for Richard Sherman. They run a lot of cover 3 defense where they keep the safety over the top.
Yeah.
And if you look at a lot of those situations, that's what you always saw. Even the play when Watkins beat him, they had the safety over the top. And another play I'll bring to your attention that Mahomes threw an interception on to Alexander. What happened, he left Sherman on the sideline when Tyreek Hill ran the skinny post.
Yeah.
Mahomes threw the ball behind him. Otherwise, it would have been a big play where Hill had decided to set down. But he had run off and left Richard Sherman.
Yeah.
Richard Sherman was a non-factor in this game when they wanted to go after him.
Let me take you to the other side of the 49ers offensive line. And we got a lot to go over, but when it comes to hiding players, anyone that can make an NFL roster, they earn it, I guess. However, we've talked about before how men have been told to play a position because you don't have the skills that we want to see at that level, allegedly. However, the great Jimmy Garoppolo, when it comes to hiding people, he got $137 million. They didn't hide that. I'm sure none of that money bounced, even though he got, I think, $75 million guaranteed. When the 49ers were running the football, they had the lead, even into the fourth quarter. In that fourth quarter, Jimmy Garoppolo, he was 3 for 11, 36 yards, 1 interception, nearly had another pick, Big C, and he also had passes batted down. So when it comes to paying people or getting the guy that you say is going to be your franchise quarterback, this is the same 49er organization that did not want to keep a Colin Kaepernick. People can say, well, whatever they want to say. But in Colin Kaepernick's performance in the Super Bowl, he threw for 302 yards, had a touchdown running and passing, and nearly led them to a come-from-behind win. Jimmy G had like 200 yards. And if you compare those two performances, one they gave $137 million to, the other in Kaepernick, they said, well, we don't want to even give you a tryout, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, there was a point in the game when the 49ers had the lead and Jimmy Garoppolo was 18 for 21.
Yeah.
The 49ers running game was non-existent. If you take away those Deebo Samuel's 5 runs with the San Francisco 49ers running game, they were held to 76 yards rushing. We're talking about 2 running backs in Coleman and Mostert in a 2-game span had 308 yards and 8 touchdowns. They were non-existent. As I said going into this game, that the Kansas City Chiefs defensive line had the 49ers run game figured out, and it would take some trickeration from the 49ers offense to even stay close, that they were not concerned with the 49ers run game. Garoppolo held them in being competitive. He got them up 20-10 in the game by throwing the ball. When they went away from throwing the ball and tried to run the ball with Mostert and Coleman, that's when the Kansas City Chiefs shut down the offense. And then Garoppolo was forced to throw. Once they eliminated that run game, then he was forced to throw. They had him figured out at that point. And the pressure from the Kansas City Chiefs defensive front was relentless, with a couple of blitz thrown in there also. They got in Garoppolo's face.
Yeah.
So, but when you think about what the Kansas City Chiefs did, they limited the San Francisco 49ers to a mere 50 plays on offense. And so this is supposed to be a ground control team that can dominate anybody on the ground, the best alleged running game in the NFL. They had a mere 50 plays of offense in the Super Bowl compared to 76 by the Kansas City Chiefs.
That's incredible, too. And just to go back to the run game, they were averaging about 6.5 yards a carry. And as you know, just like with Derrick Henry for the Tennessee Titans when he was running over New England and also running over Baltimore, the running backs get better as you give them the ball more. And they have a team that got to the Super Bowl by running. They were a run-heavy team, and even in the playoffs they were run-heavy. But when you stop giving the ball at 20 carries, most running backs don't even get to 100 yards until they touch the rock 20 times. And to stop it at that point, I thought that was not dancing with the person that took you to the dance. But on the other side of that,
but Steve, 4 of those carries came from Deebo Samuels, a wide receiver, on reverses. That was their best running back of the game. When you think about Coleman and you think about Mostert, there was 16 carries between those guys. 16 carries between these running backs. They did not average 7 yards a carry. That was Deebo Samuel on the reverses. He averaged 18 yards a carry in the game. So when you go back to what the running backs did, they had 16 carries, Charlton. 16 carries, and I believe it was 76 yards that they had the 16 carries. So they were nowhere close to that 7 yards a carry. They were more in that 4.5 yard a carry category. So the Kansas City Chiefs, like I said, held them in check. They knew what Kansas City ran. Kansas City wanted to run wide sweeps to get to the sideline. They had 5 plays where they had decent runs by the running back. Other than that, they were shut down by the Kansas City Chiefs defense.
I still think if you're a running back, just like a pitcher, you want your starting pitcher, you want him going at least 100 pitches. You don't pull him when he's at 35 pitches in a game and say, well, he's not giving us what he wants. I just think they knew what Honey Badger said. He said, thank God that they started throwing the ball. And for them, for a guy who's not the biggest player, but he sure has a lot of tenacity about him, Big C, when they're hoping that your $137 million quarterback is going to pass the ball, and then the same thing that Coach Shanahan is under the fire about is he knew the weakness of his own team. So Garoppolo had a decent half of football, but at the same time, when it was put on his shoulders, then he couldn't do what Shanahan tried to hide for the whole season, Big C, and that's pass the ball more than 20 yards downfield, Big C. Your thoughts?
But he also shut down his run game. If your run game is shut down, now the quarterback is going to be forced to throw the ball. And I don't put it all on Jimmy Garoppolo's shoulder. I put it more on Kyle Shanahan's shoulders than what I do Jimmy Garoppolo.
Why is that?
Kyle Shanahan right now has to be considered one of the greatest choke artists in Super Bowl history. This is a guy, when he was offensive coordinator of the Atlanta Falcons 5 years ago down in Houston, and going into the fourth quarter, they had a 99.7% chance of winning the football game.
Yeah.
They lost in overtime to the New England Patriots because he could not figure out what to do offensively. He got kind of panicky. He did the same thing last night in Miami. Going into the fourth quarter, the San Francisco 49ers statistically had a 96% chance of winning the football game. Who was the same guy calling offensive plays? Kyle Shanahan. Just like with Matt Ryan down in Atlanta, Kyle Shanahan was calling offensive plays for him. Just like for Jimmy Garoppolo last night in Miami and San Francisco, Kyle Shanahan was the guy calling the offensive plays. I look at both quarterbacks. Matt Ryan was an MVP of the league. Jimmy Garoppolo was a guy who had the best record in the NFL this past season. Kyle Shanahan got to the biggest game of all as an offensive play caller and choked once again. I mean, he's still kicking up duck feathers out of his throat.
Well, I don't know if you call it choke at that level, because if he choked as a coach, there's a lot of coaches. You got to say everybody choked, because he got his team to where everybody wants to get. But it's still a players. I hear athletes say it all the time. You could have the best coach in the history of the universe on the sideline. It's the players' game, and that's why when they call him Honey Badger, when he went to the sideline and he started to get into players, a lot of that fire and brimstone. A lot of great pitchers have that. T.D. Jakes has that fire and brimstone mentality. He lit a spark under them because they were also flat. That wasn't the coach. That Andy Reid didn't do it. Players
but
step
look
up
at
and
the
do
label
that.
Andy Reid took into this game. The coach that could not win the big game.
Yeah.
It wasn't Kansas City couldn't win the big game. It wasn't Philadelphia couldn't win the game. It was Andy Reid that couldn't win the big game. He had coached 221 games, the most of any coach that had won 221 games without winning the Super Bowl. No one said the Kansas City Chiefs couldn't win. Everyone was saying Andy Reid could win. So then you got to put that same mantra on Kyle Shanahan.
Yeah.
This is a coach that has had 2 bites at the apple and choked on both of them.
Yeah, well, let me just draw a comparison, because this Super Bowl was about so many things. We had the Latin halftime, 2 Latin Americans co-hosting the halftime event. That's the first time that's ever happened in Super Bowl history. To have Tuskegee Airmen, give out the coin that's used for the coin flip, and the 49ers won the coin toss, but the Chiefs won the game, so that was the first. What I really want to bring attention to, and sometimes I take a little umbrage at it when people say Andy Reid's offense, this really was Eric Bieniemy. He's the offensive coordinator, and that 4th down play called the spin play, a lot of people said that it was fun to watch. It was Eric Bieniemy. Think about this. You go back in history all the time. The NFL's top offensive coordinator, Kansas City Chiefs offensive coordinator, Eric Bieniemy, on a 4th down play at the goal line, designed what's called the spin play. That was ran in the Rose Bowl in 1947, USC versus Michigan, 73 years ago. That wasn't Andy Reid that came up with that play. That was Eric Bieniemy, who still could not get even an interview for a job. I want to make sure we start giving credit where it's due. I think Eric Bieniemy outperformed Shanahan, in my opinion. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, they actually lined up, even as you call it a spin play, they were in the wishbone formation.
Yeah.
If you look at it, an offense that was very synonymous with college football back in the 70s, that many teams ran the wishbone, and even in the early 80s with the 3 backs in the backfield. They faked it, the snap to Mahomes, and went straight to the running back.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden they're in the end zone for a touchdown. But you have to be innovative. When you look at the speed of the Kansas City offense, that's what it was going to sway the 49er defense. They were trying to beat them to the point. And when you look at the play, it's a cutback, basically a backside trap that they ran, and were able to get down to the 1-yard line, Charlton. But the Kansas City Chiefs, the fear factor of that team, as we talked about it all week, they were on a track meet. And you can see that in Kyle Shanahan. And I'm going to go back to Kyle Shanahan again.
Yeah.
This is a guy that right before the first half had 3 timeouts. He let the clock run. And he said in his post-game press conference, he did not want the ball to go back to the Kansas City Chiefs because he was fearful of that team speed that they had and that young guy that they had playing quarterback that became the MVP of the game. He didn't want to put the ball in his hands and potentially give him a chance to score because he knew that his defense had not quite figured him out yet. So once again, I go back to Kyle Shanahan choking on more than one occasion. He choked right before halftime, and he choked in the second half.
I wouldn't necessarily call it choke, but I want to get your opinion on something. Did you notice how on the field, we kept seeing John Lynch at least down on the field at some point in time? Now, maybe every GM hangs out on the field, but they had a little bit of Jerry Jones in them. I'm not leading him back to the Atlanta loss. That was just the Patriots came back and played a better game. But how do you feel when your boss is always looking over your shoulder? I mean, Lynch should have stayed up in the press box. Why is he down on the sideline? Maybe that's giving 2 messages. Jerry Jones does that all the time to Gary. He also did it to every coach that he's had for the Cowboys. Would you agree with that? Keep the GM up in the press box and stop having the guy look over his shoulder, or would you not agree with that, Big C? Your thoughts?
Did you pay attention to John Lynch the last minute of the first half when they shot of him up in the press box?
Yeah, he was saying call timeout.
When he's there making the motion for timeout and screaming, "Why don't you take a timeout?"
Yeah.
That's probably part of the reason why he came in. He saw the ineptitude of his head coach at that time, being under pressure, reminiscing about what he did when he was in Atlanta, not understanding how to utilize the clock. But John Lynch, the general manager of the team, right before halftime, when San Francisco got the ball back, and they ran that first play, he was signaling, call a timeout. Kyle Shanahan didn't do it. So maybe he needed to come down and get more personal in the head coach's ear.
Wow, man, I love that thinking, Big C. They got a contract extension headed out to him from my understanding in the Bay Area. We're going to take what's called the Big C timeout, also known as the Big C pause. When we come back, we're going to talk more about some NFL football and what happened in this game. We can take the Big C timeout, and we hope that you'll come back and enjoy us in the second half. All right, we are back after the Big C timeout, also known as the Big C pause, and you can follow Big C Sports 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on the #1 podcast network in the universe, iHeartRadio podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Apple Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on Google Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on Spreaker.com. The apps that I really love are by Google and Alexa. Just say Google or Alexa, play Big C Sports Podcast. You will hear from our sponsors. You will hear welcome to the show. I will introduce Big C as the Mystic, and he'll do his thing. And I really appreciate the way things are growing with Big C Sports Podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Xfinity, Comcast TV, Roku TV, Apple TV, Fire TV, and a lot of smart TVs all over the universe. But you got to have a smart TV or it's not going to work for you, Big C. Who was that good old boy? He kept having Groundhog Day, and they kept coming back to the same event until he saw this orange truck or Jeep and he got into it. I forgot the name of the actor, but that was a funny commercial, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, talking, I think that was Bill Murray who he did the movie called Groundhog Day. But, Groundhog Day last night was for the San Francisco 49ers. You go into this game. What do the San Francisco 49ers do well? Run. You go into this game. What do the Kansas City Chiefs do well? Pass. Both of those teams were able to take away what each other did in the first half. Who was able to make the better adjustments? Kansas City Chiefs. But I thought the Kansas City Chiefs, bad misfortunes in the first half was all about tiring out the secondary of the San Francisco 49ers. You got that track team out there running routes. And then with the San Francisco 49ers, you saw in the Derrick Henry game in the AFC Championship game that the Kansas City Chiefs were going to get in the box and not give you anything up the middle. They forced the San Francisco wide to the sideline all night long to get any type of running plays. And so they saw deja vu in Groundhog Day last night in Miami. Maybe
they needed to find an orange Jeep to get into, Big C. Kansas City Chiefs became the first team in NFL history to fall behind double digits in 3 playoff games and win them all. The prop betting guys must have made a lot of money in Missouri, Big C, and they were saying it's ironic. Because I want to get your thoughts on, as a defensive guy, what defensive player is saying we want the highest paid quarterback on at least the highest paid player on the 49ers. We want the ball in his hands. They wanted it in his hands, and they got what they wanted. But again, a testament to the Chiefs. You don't come from behind double digits in 3 games and become world champions unless you're the Kansas City Chiefs. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, I guess you'd have to make those same statements when you talk about Deshaun Watson. You just have to say it about Ryan Tannehill as well as you said about Jimmy Garoppolo. They wanted the ball in all 3 of those quarterbacks' hands, Charlton. All 3 of those quarterbacks had a commanding lead over Mr. Mahomes until it came down to the second half, and all of a sudden he decided he wanted to play football. I don't think when you look across the table at the Kansas City Chiefs, they beat Lamar Jackson during the regular season, the league's MVP. So this was the guy that they said nobody could defend. They beat every quarterback that showed up. They beat Tom Brady. So there wasn't a quarterback that wasn't in their wake, Charlton, that they could not defeat. Patrick Mahomes is an entity within himself in the NFL. We saw something last night and even last season. This is his second season as a full-time starter in the NFL. And you think about what he's done. He went to the AFC Championship game, should have went to the Super Bowl, if not for a couple of flaky calls by the NFL officials.
Yep.
He got to the Super Bowl in his second year, Charlton, and he showed the world who he is, Mr. Mahomes. Lamar Jackson won the season MVP as the top player in the NFL.
Yeah.
Patrick Mahomes is the best player in the NFL. Lamar Jackson did something that enamored everybody with his heroics, with his legs and dynamic plays. But Patrick Mahomes is a guy who can run the ball adequately. He can throw the ball far superior to anybody we ever seen. And he put that display on stage on the biggest of stage, Charlton, over the past 2 years.
26 of 42, 286 yards, had 2 touchdowns, had 2 interceptions. One of those interceptions was a tip ball. But, it is what it is. He still became the MVP. And as African-American quarterback, the youngest player ever to be the MVP in the Super Bowl. And even when you get onto that, Big C, looking at Andy Reid, the only coach in NFL history to draft an African-American quarterbacks, more than one, plural, quarterbacks in the first round of the NFL. Big C, that make any sense to you? The first only to do that? Your thoughts?
Well, Andy Reid is the only head coach in NFL history to draft 2 African-American quarterbacks in the first round, Charlton, of the NFL draft. And in those 2 quarterbacks, Charlton, he has made 7 championship games with those 2 quarterbacks, 5 in the NFC with Donovan McNabb, and he made those back-to-back, 5 back-to-back NFC championship games and 1 Super Bowl appearance with Donovan McNabb. And now with Patrick Mahomes, Charlton, he has made 2 consecutive AFC championship appearances and 1 Super Bowl appearance and a Super Bowl victory. So I think Andy Reid, more than anybody, understands in the NFL the impact of an African-American quarterback. And he also had Michael Vick in between that, Charlton. So when he looks and understands the dynamics of what an African-American quarterback means to the NFL, more than anybody else, they can talk about him never winning a Super Bowl before with 221 victories, but you think about his 222nd victory, Charlton, in the NFL. And you look at the date on the calendar. It came 02/02/20.
Yeah.
There were 3 twos involved in his 222nd victory on the calendar last night.
Well, that sounds like some good lotto numbers, Big C. Maybe they should look at – I don't think Andy Reid's going to step down anytime soon. He's not going to do what Bill Walsh did, get a win and walk away. Maybe consider Andy Reid for NFL commissioner. The man seemed to not have a biased bone in his body. And it just goes to show there are a lot of decent men in this world. I appreciate Andy Reid for more than just being a winning Super Bowl coach. Now, a winning Super Bowl coach, Big C, that must sound good on his mantle. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, I mean, this is what all players and coaches dream about, Charlton, when you're in a professional sport, reaching the pinnacle, being a champion, being a world champion. It is the greatest feeling in the world when that final second clicks off the clock, Charlton, and you realize that you are now the best in your particular sport, that you are now and forever will be recognized as the world champion.
Andy Reid, among the best coaches in the universe. Really appreciate the way Andy Reid conducts himself on and off the field. And then one more thing, and not that this matters, sometimes, people do what they want to do, but I was asked, someone asked him, was he going to sleep with the trophy? And he said he's going to sleep with his trophy wife. He held his wife's hand all throughout walking around the field. He didn't leave her behind, and he just held her hand. To me, it's a subtle thing, but I really appreciate the class of Andy Reid. So 49ers, they get the first score of the game. It was a field goal by Robbie Gould, and right then, that showed you that they didn't get what they wanted. They needed 7. They got the field goal. And how fitting was that? It came down to them, that 4 points they gave up by getting the field goal instead of a touchdown, Big C. Outside of that last run by the Chiefs, that would have kept the score tight, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, what I look at in this, and I'll go back to Kyle Shanahan once again. Here's a situation where you need 2 yards to pick up a first down.
Yeah.
You allegedly have the best running game in the NFL.
Yeah.
And you're not willing to try to get this 2 yards. At that point, you had been gouging the Kansas City Chiefs defense on the ground. So I go back to Kyle Shanahan, who choked in this situation, who should have went for it. I mean, you're in decent field position. Your defense, is a dominant defense.
Yeah.
Your running game, at that point, like you said, they were averaging 7 yards a carry.
Yeah.
You felt that your offense was incapable of getting you 2 yards. That was the first choke of Kyle Shanahan in the game.
Yeah. Well, I mean, choke's a very strong word, but you are a defensive guy. I understand what you're saying. And just counter that and what you just said about going for the field goal. When you had momentum, they were moving up and down the field, Big C, and they let it get away. Patrick Mahomes, he scored the first touchdown of the game on a run to put the Chiefs up 7-3. But think about what happened. It was a 15-play, 75-yard drive. It consumed 7 minutes and 26 seconds. And then Mahomes, he ran it in for a score. He didn't try to throw it out of bounds. Big C, your thoughts?
Yeah, but what got them down there, Charlton, what Kyle Shanahan wouldn't do. Andy Reid went for it on a 4th and short and picked up the first down. The Kansas City Chiefs have not gone for it on 4th down all year long.
Yeah.
They decided on the grandest of stages that they were playing to win, not to lose. Kyle Shanahan played the game hoping not to lose, and he was not aggressive. Andy Reid said, I don't have it tomorrow.
Yeah.
I came here and I brought my team here to win. On 4th and short, we're going for it. They got the first down, sustained the drive, Charlton, and a touchdown was the result of it, where the 49ers only got a field goal because they were too afraid.
Yeah, it does matter. Jimmy Garoppolo comes back and throws an interception. His first one under the game. He was under pressure. Kansas City wanted him to pass. I remember when I first started covering NFL football with the networks. I believe the first network was Fox Sports. And I used to keep stats, and it was called under pressure. How many times was the quarterback pressured? How many times was he hit under pressure? How many times was he sacked under pressure? Even though Jimmy G played a good first half, it was under pressure that he fell down. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, under pressure is how we rate things, Charlton. But, I mean, when you look at a quarterback throwing an interception, is it always about the quarterback, as you say? Did the receiver run the right route? Did he get off the coverage quick enough? He threw the interception, but I look at Patrick Mahomes, who threw 2 interceptions in the game also. Mahomes threw an interception to a wide open, linebacker on a play.
Yeah.
Where we would have had Tyreek Hill in the seam.
Yeah.
And so whether it's under pressure or not, when the quarterback doesn't get the ball to where it should be, even the one he threw to Tyreek Hill that bounced off of Tyreek's arm, it was behind Tyreek.
Yeah.
You'll call it a tip pass, but it was a bad pass by the quarterback.
Yeah, quarterbacks do have their issues also. It reminded me of Ohio State and Clemson, where the Ohio State receiver broke off the pass and the interception was credited to the quarterback. Kansas City also, Dustin Colquitt. I know you don't like kickers, but when you got him, it's nice to have a good one. It was Dustin Colquitt that kicked the field goal that also gave the Chiefs a 10-3 lead over the 49ers. But as you also talked about, too, Kansas City Chiefs, their defense proved again that they had the ability to stop the run. But I want to go to something that also made a little bit of history, too. Garoppolo threw a touchdown pass to fullback Kyle Juszczyk, and it was a catch and run. It was the first Ivy League player to score a touchdown in the Super Bowl. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, I mean, when we think about players who have played in the Super Bowl, Charlton, from all eras and all universities, it doesn't mean that you have to come from a Power 5 conference to be effective. Kyle Juszczyk also is the highest paid fullback in the NFL, so he's no slouch.
No, he's no slouch. Also, the 7th fullback to score in the Super Bowl, tying the game at 10 apiece in the second quarter. So that's good, good news for people coming out of the Ivy League. I really love the back and forth that we had in this game. But I love even more so, and I know that we talked about it before, and what I would hate to have happen, I know Saleh as the defensive coordinator for the 49ers, he's going to get some job interviews. That's just going to happen. I think he's an Arab-American, Big C, and also you look at Eric Bieniemy, he may or may not get some interviews, but could you imagine these two men that are orchestrating, holding each other in check until I think there was about 7 minutes left in the game, offensively and defensively. Two men of color going against each other. It would be a shame if they both left for better opportunities next year, but I wouldn't doubt that they're going to get the phone call. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, they're going to be with their organizations, Charlton, because all the head coaching positions are filled. But when I think about what Eric Bieniemy did in this game, as everyone raved all year about Eric Saleh and his defense, Charlton, That defense gave up 76 plays to the Kansas City Chiefs.
Yeah.
And he had no answer for Patrick Mahomes in the last 6 minutes of the game. You got to realize the Chiefs scored 21 unanswered points against this San Francisco 49ers defense that was supposed to be the top defense in the NFL.
Yeah.
Patrick Mahomes had no problem figuring them out, Charlton. 21 answered points. He did this against everybody. He did it against the Houston Texans. He did it against the Tennessee Titans. And now the San Francisco 49ers, Charlton. So as we say, and you mentioned Bieniemy and you mentioned Saleh, and you say it all can't fall on the coaches. And it fell on the coaches. It fell on Shanahan choking. It fell on Saleh not being able to figure out Mahomes. And it came down to Bieniemy knowing what to run against Saleh's defense.
Isn't that amazing? San Francisco's Robbie Gould. You got to have a kicker. He's as good as they come. Kick the field goal to make the score 13-10. The 49ers took that lead. But that was the third quarter. I just think as far as coaching goes, I think we really saw one of the better played Super Bowls. At least it went down to the wire. Kansas City took a bigger lead, later in the game with about a minute 26 to play. But something else I want to come up and think about, you as a defensive guy. I know you don't like offensive players, and you even hate that they have face masks as a penalty now in the NFL still. But Patrick Mahomes, he also had his issues. He had a fumble. It was caused by Nick Bosa. And then he threw an interception. It was kind of back-to-back in the third quarter. It was his first in the playoffs in over 163 passes. Big C, your thoughts?
It was his first ever fumble ever, Charles. The first ever interception that he's thrown in 2 years in the playoffs. But, I mean, everybody's human when it comes down to that. It's how you rebound from the errors that you make as a player to show your stones, as they would say in the old days. And Patrick Mahomes showed he had some big cojones last night because he was not undaunted by the mistakes that he made. He took it upon himself. He didn't put his head down, and I saw that with Jimmy Garoppolo, grimacing, when he made a mistake, yelling. Patrick Mahomes said, it's on me. I'll be right back. And he has proven that throughout his short career. That mistakes don't bother him, Charlton. Is that he is a natural-born leader. And when you can make the plays that he makes when he's under pressure and he can find a receiver wide open down the field, Charlton, he can pull the ball down and run for positive yards. He does everything that a great teammate will do. And so when I sit there and I hear everybody rave about this guy and that guy, it's not about how much money you make as a quarterback. And eventually, within the next 12 months, the Kansas City Chiefs are going to tell Patrick Mahomes and his representative, just give us a piece of paper. And that piece of paper is probably going to have $200 million on there, at least, minimum. And they're going to say, we can work with that. You know, that's all they can say is we can work with that because this man has already proved, just like Dak Prescott, that they're the most underpaid, underappreciated quarterbacks in the NFL. Even though he's been an MVP, he's the most underpaid, and he's on his $15.7 million guaranteed money from his rookie contract. He has 1 year left on that contract. The Kansas City Chiefs would behoove them to sign him before the season starts because they would have a bargain. Because if they wait till after the season, Charlton, that number will go from $200 million up to $250 million.
Well, I'm sure Lee Steinberg would like his percentage out of that money, Big C. I think Lee Steinberg, his players, his clients have given over $1 billion to charity. $1 billion. That's a lot of money. How much money has Lee Steinberg made? I'm sure he'll do a good job representing Patrick Mahomes. Now, when you go back to the game, and Mostert had, 220 yards or 230 yards? I think it's 230 yards rushing. No, 220 rushing in the game, championship game versus the Green Bay Packers. Mostert had a 1 yard, scoring run, and it was a big run because that gave the 49ers that last score of the game, and they led 20-10 at that point. I know you said that the defense, the coordinator for the Chiefs figured out how to stop the. But at the same time, I still think the 49ers gave up on what got them there. No matter, 4 yards they average, Big C. That's better than Franco Harris did. He's a Hall of Famer, Big C. They didn't have to give up on the run. Your thoughts?
Well, they didn't start the game with the run. They started the game pass. You got to realize the first half, Garoppolo 18 of 21 in the first half. That's what kept the 49ers in the game. When you look at what Mostert had, I believe he had 14 carries for 58 yards, Charlton. He was never a threat in the game as far as dominating the Chiefs' defense. Spagnuolo had a great defensive plan. As I said, the Chiefs would not allow the 49ers to run the ball. When you think about Mostert and Coleman together, 76 yards rushing in the game, Charlton.
Yeah.
Without Deebo Samuels, the 49ers had no running game. He set an NFL receiver rushing record in the game. He had 53 yards rushing on 4 carries. That was the 49ers rushing game. What they did as running backs were held in check by that Kansas City Chiefs front seven, Charlton. They got on the 49ers offensive line, said, not today, buddy, and they didn't go anywhere. So the stat about them being a dominant running game is misleading because they never had a chance to run the ball in the Super Bowl because of the Chiefs' defensive front.
Keep in mind, when Henry was rushing for 188 yards or 180 yards, he ran the ball more than 20 times. He was getting about 34 yards
they
a
weren't
carry.
playing against the Kansas City Chiefs. Both of those teams, you had Henry going into that AFC Championship game, averaging 194 yards a game.
Yeah.
You had the San Francisco 49ers coming to the Super Bowl where Coleman in the semifinal round had gained 104. Morstead gained 204 yards and 4 touchdowns.
Yeah.
You had 2 running backs for the Kansas City Chiefs, the San Francisco 49ers, over a 2-game stretch, gained 308 yards and rushed for 8 touchdowns. They gained 76 yards and 1 touchdown against the Kansas City Chiefs, just like Henry. He gained 78 yards and no touchdowns against the Kansas City Chiefs. So Steve Spagnuolo, as we talk about coaches, we talked about Saleh, you talk about Bieniemy, we talked about Shanahan choking. You got to take your hat off to Spagnuolo, the defensive coordinator for the Kansas City Chiefs, because he held the 2 most potent running games in the NFL, Charlton, in 2 games, the AFC Championship game and the Super Bowl, to less than 130 yards rushing.
But when you think about Henry, when he had the 180-plus yards against New England and also against Baltimore, they ran him more than 20 times. He got up to the 180s when he touched the ball about 30 times, Big C. I still think that was a fault for them. Also, back to the game, MVP Patrick Mahomes had a nice touchdown pass to Travis Kelce. Love seeing Kelce get into the act. And then you think about Mahomes, it's just shining in how good he was, Big C, because he really came alive when the team needed him to come alive. Kind of like electricity, Big C. When it strikes, you can hear it. The MVP, Patrick Mahomes, it was in the 4th quarter. The best quarterback in the NFL, in fact, the best quarterback in the universe, threw a 5-yard touchdown pass to Williams, and that gave Kansas City the lead 24-20, and that was just about 2 minutes and 44 seconds to play in that game. And then the guy that you love to hate, Big C, that good old boy Richard Sherman, the first time he's given up a score in any playoff or Super Bowl game in his career, but he was beaten to the corner of the end zone by Williams, and some people say he stepped out of bounds. Was the ball across the goal line? Even if he was out of bounds, Bieniemy and Reed would have gone for it, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, they would have scored, but, the ball broke the plane. If you look at it, all you have to do is get the tip of the ball across the plane, Charlton, just the front of the end line. It's a touchdown. And he did that simultaneously as the foot was going out of bounds. But the thing was, Richard Sherman couldn't get there in time enough to beat it. It's not that I hate on Richard Sherman. It's just, as a player,
he calls for
everybody slows down.
Yeah.
And you can see that in Richard Sherman. When he was chasing Sammy Watkins, you're going to tell me he was running stride for stride with Sammy Watkins?
No.
It looked just like when Devontae Adams got behind him with Green Bay.
Yeah.
When you don't run a cover 3 cloud where you roll a safety over the top, you never saw Richard Sherman one-on-one in that game last night with any receiver. That's not hating on Richard Sherman. The San Francisco 49ers, Greg Saleh, defensive coordinator, understands that also. I cannot leave Richard Sherman on an island any longer in his career one-on-one. If I don't give him safety help, he's vulnerable. And if not for the safety, number 20, Ward, coming over the top for San Francisco last night, Watkins was in the end zone because Sherman was in trail position by at least 3 to 4 yards.
Yeah, he didn't say, "You mad, bro?" like he told Tom Brady back in the day. Sometimes you give it, you got to take it. Damien Williams, that 38-yard touchdown run that gave Kansas City it kind of in appearance-wise, a 31-20 lead in the 4th quarter. But he earned it. He turned the corner and ran 38 yards to the house. I still think San Francisco got out of his element. Inexcusably, they abandoned the run game that got them to the Super Bowl. It allowed the 49ers to throw Jimmy Garoppolo in, and he was exposed for all of his weaknesses. And I don't think that in my opinion, people talk about the great Joe Montana. They talk about the great Steve Young. they kind of want a glimpse past Colin Kaepernick. But Colin Kaepernick threw for 300 yards in his Super Bowl performance, and a lot of people hated him because he stood for equality. So that, to me, it just burns me how they want to put Garoppolo as the heir apparent to Joe Montana and Steve Young and Colin Kaepernick, but he didn't have nearly the performance. I just want to say this also, and I'll get your thoughts. The best offensive coordinator in Kansas City, and I think in the NFL, Eric Bieniemy. Would it be fair to say that a guy who cannot even get a head coaching interview, that he outsmarted Kyle Shanahan, who got in the league because of his father, a little bit of nepotism, designing plays to win Super Bowl 54 in the 100th year of the NFL? Vic, your thoughts?
No, I don't think he outsmarted Kyle Shanahan. It's like I've been saying the whole time. Kyle Shanahan choked. Kyle Shanahan has had
Really?
2 bites at the apple.
Yeah.
So, like I said, at the end of the first half, Kyle Shanahan choked up at that point. He got scared. You got a minute to go on the clock. You got 3 timeouts, and you choose not to use any of them. And as I spoke about John Lynch, the general manager, he's up in his luxury suite yelling, "Call timeout," giving the signal. Kyle Shanahan wouldn't do that because he was scared. He was scared of the Kansas City Chiefs. So it wasn't about Eric Bieniemy. It was that you had a coach who went into the fourth quarter last night with a 96% chance to win the game. That's what statistically say. They said you got a 10-point lead, started the fourth quarter, you got a 96% chance of the win. You had a 23-point lead against New England 6 years ago down in Houston, 5 years ago down in Houston.
Yeah.
You had a 99% chance to win the game, 99.7.
Yeah.
And you choked. So I can't say that he's getting out coached by anybody. All I can say is this guy is choked in 2 Super Bowls that he's been calling offensive plays.
That's incredible. Big C, when you look at the quarterback comparison, you look at Jimmy G and his numbers versus Patrick Mahomes. He was 20 of 31, 219 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions, hit a number of times, shaky on a lot of passes, 3 of 11 in the fourth quarter. Great Patrick Mahomes, I believe 26 of 42, 286 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. What, money aside, who would you take as, well, how would you grade them? What grade would you give them, Big C? Your thoughts?
I mean, I make the grade as equal, Charleston. You talked about Patrick Mahomes throwing 2 interceptions. That's the same as Jimmy G. He threw 2 interceptions in the game also. But like I said, we're grading just the quarterbacks in this situation. Like I said, I look at the guys calling the play calls. Who put Jimmy G in that position calling the plays? Kyle Shanahan.
Yeah.
It's going to fall back on Jimmy G, but no, I got to go with the guy that's calling the plays. Just like with Patrick Mahomes. Who's calling the plays for him?
Yeah.
Eric Bieniemy. He's putting him in the proper situation, whether it's a running play or a passing play. Like I said, it started in the first half with Kyle Shanahan. He choked. He put Jimmy G in a bad situation, and Jimmy G was sitting there waiting to be bailed out by his coach, and his coach was panicking and could not bail him out.
Well, that's incredible, Big C. I want to just ask your thoughts. 1 Super Bowl record was set by the 49ers defense receiver Deebo Samuels, and 3 Super Bowl records were tied by the Kansas City Chiefs. Big C, any thoughts on what they might be?
Well, that's Deebo Samuel, Charlton. 4 rushes for 53 yards, the most rushing yards ever by a receiver in the Super Bowl. And then when you look on the Kansas City Chiefs side, Charlton, Damian Williams, he tied a record for scoring 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter, Charlton, as a running back. We also think about the Kansas City Chiefs. 0 punt return yards in a Super Bowl.
Yeah.
That is the first time in Super Bowl history, well, it's tied a record in the Super Bowl, Charlton, not having any punt return yards in a game.
That's amazing. Big C, I'm telling you, there's so much I love about this game. You can follow Big C Sports 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on the #1 podcast network in the universe, iHeartRadio podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Apple Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on Google Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on Spreaker.com. The apps that I really love are by Google and Alexa. Just say Google or Alexa, play Big C Sports Podcast. You will hear from our sponsors. You will hear welcome to the show. I will introduce Big C as the Mystic, and he'll do his thing. And I really appreciate the way things are growing with Big C Sports Podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Xfinity, Comcast TV, Roku TV, Apple TV, Fire TV, and a lot of smart TVs all over the universe. Even Donald J. Trump congratulated the Kansas City Chiefs on a great game, a fantastic comeback under immense pressure. he said that you represented the great state of Kansas. Big C, did they move to Kansas? Big C, your thoughts?
Well, when I saw that tweet last night from the president, Charlton, I wonder if he ever took a geography course in high school or college, which he said he was a tremendous student, and he doesn't know anybody more intelligent than him in the world. But that's, it used to be a show on TV by Jeff Foxworthy. Are you smarter than a fifth grader or something like that, or a second grader?
Hey, well,
and I don't know if Donald Trump would be willing to get on that show because he doesn't know where Kansas and Missouri is. I know they're close to each other, but he doesn't know geography.
Well, sometimes close enough is good enough, Big C. I just want to say congratulations to the state of Missouri. The St. Louis Blues win Lord Stanley's Cup, and now the Kansas City Chiefs win the Super Bowl 54, and they're going to have a celebration on Wednesday. It's a great game. Man, time flies by too fast. What a great game. Big C, back in the day, there was a man by the name of Drew Boudini Brown. He was known as Muhammad Ali's right-hand man, and he would always tell Ali, with all you got to use, how can you lose? Rumble, young man, rumble. Big C, what are you looking forward to in the sports universe?
Well, Charlton, March Madness starts in a month in college basketball. Spring football starts in 7 weeks.
Well, it starts in 7 weeks. They said, Patrick Mahomes, you've now won a Super Bowl. Where are you going to go? He says, we're going to Disney World. Well, you can go to Disney World, too, every Monday through Friday at 5 and 6 p.m. worldwide when you follow Big C Sports on the Big C Sports Network, on the #1 network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports has been voted the #1 sports show in the universe, according to Big C and them good old boys down south. As we always tell you, there's never, ever an excuse for domestic violence. If you know any man or woman going through that garbage, please pick up the phone and call 911, because no man or woman should ever have to go through that garbage on their own. And as we always tell you on every Big C Sports show, we thank you, we appreciate you, and we hope that you have a super fantastic day.